It's great to see so many familiar faces in the audience, and for those of you that I don't know, I hope I get a chance to get to know you a little bit today. I want to just tell you the story of Pine Avenue and how we got to Anna Maria and some of the things that we're doing that have gotten some notice, certainly in the community at large, now by the United Nations with sustainability, and trying to reflect the character, the integrity, the history of the area. I don't ever remember not being in Anna Maria. I came here, I like to say, in utero. And first memories are my great uncle's house that was down at 859 North Shore. That has been beautifully restored, by the way, just incredibly well done. They added a bedroom to it, and that was a house that was built by his man from his farm in Auburndale in the late 40s. And he would come down on the weekends and he would work, and it was a block and cedar insides and all wood, and that's the earliest memories I have growing up, is being in that house. We'd get 2 weeks there every summer, maybe a little bit more. And I remember the days of walking forever to get to the beach, and then the days where you walked right out the back door and the water was right there, the ebb and flow that I've been familiar with over my tenure at the Sandbar as well. So sustaining the future, and how do we use the intrinsic qualities of the areas that make us unique to continue to reflect the heritage of an area. And so that starts for me as a kid that's growing up here and loves the sand streets and the fishing and just being on the island. And then at 14 or 15, doesn't like Anna Maria as much because of the fact that why we all love it so much today, and that's because there was nothing to do for a 14 or 15-year-old. No go-kart tracks, no chicks to cruise, no amusement parks. Just this great, sleepy little village that never really got discovered, thank God, until pretty good zoning laws were in effect. So Anna Maria is a unique, it's a real environment, it's a real village and a city and a community, and it has its own feel to it. And when the Pine Avenue project started, so we get in the restaurant business in 1979, 38 years ago last week, amazing. Where the time goes. And we understand the history of the site. It's the history of the family. It's the history of a couple of generations of Chileses. My great uncle owned all the lots on the North Point at one time. I think he sold them for $50 or $150 or something, But we bought a piece of history at the Sandbar restaurant. So the Sandbar, if you look at the modern history of Anna Maria, it's the history of the Sandbar restaurant. Sandbar restaurant is the bathhouse in 1912. What's the modern history of the island? Modern history of the island is in 1911, the Anna Maria Beach Development Company with Mr. Bean, who Bean Point, and Mr. Roser from Roser Church, who built the church as a memorial to his wife. They built the city pier down here at the end of the street, and there it is, and 1911. And they started bringing sports in from parts north. The ferries, 4 different ferries were running out of Clearwater and St. Pete. They come down here, they dump them off at the city pier, and they would stay down there where the old hotel was built a few years later, and they maybe fish around there, but most of them would promenade down the sand path of our main street, Pine Avenue. And they would go in 1912 to the site of the bathhouse, which is the site that the Sandbar restaurant sits on today. So there was maybe 10 houses on the north end of the island then. There was no cars, obviously, no bridges, no roads, really. And they would bring the people in, and the tradition of great times and families being here on a generational basis starts a little over 100 years ago. 1911 they do that, 1912, and that's the yin and the yang of the island, right? You go over, you've got a locker, you can get a what they called a dope back then. That was a little Coca-Cola or something. You could get an ice cream. There was a platform that they built out that a wire ran out to for the people that were afraid to swim, and they would go out to the platform. I still don't understand exactly how that worked, but it's in the history books. And I know the last piling broke off after 1979 in a storm. It would be up on a high tide, on a low tide. You almost couldn't see it at a high tide. It was very dangerous. But I remember it bobbing by one day in a bad storm and seeing the last of that relic. So the Sandbar restaurant is there, and that tradition continues until the 40s when the bathhouse burns down and they bring on two army barracks, an army barrack, and it gets put on the site, and that then becomes the Sandbar restaurant. So from then to 1979, we take over the restaurant at that point and start doing business and want to do something that reflects the place that we grew up in. In 2007, the street had some changes that were going on, and it was actually probably 2006. And really the main change was the Pine Avenue Marina sold. Nobody knew how many lots were on the Pine Avenue Marina. The Pine Avenue Marina was a fixture. I remember it from the time I was a kid. There was a little general store there, and you could get a pretty good Cuban sandwich. You could get a 6-pack of beer, Cokes or water, ice. You could get your boat worked on. You could get your boat put up in dry storage there. And all of a sudden that went away, and there was a plat map, and there was 5 lots there. And they built the first 3 houses. One of the developers that had started developing on the island, and they built them pretty much the same way. They put a little bit of different facade, and they maxed them out, right? FEMA says that you got to go up, and you can build to this much, and they built them as big as they could build them, and that worried me, and it worried some other people. I'm a big property rights guy, so you do whatever the law says that you have the right to do. By God, you've got the right to do it. And if I want to do something else, then I need to stroke a check and say, buy the property and do it a different way. But we did not want to lose the potential to have the main street that was always supposed to happen in Anna Maria and didn't. Successive comprehensive plans, the master planning documents for all of our communities in Florida, had stronger language put in. Every 14, 15 years they update them. Stronger language every time they did it to promote mixed use in the residential, office, retail area. And that's this half a mile. So it's very interesting. You had this incredible canvas in which to paint on. And by that I mean, where would you find the main street that never happened? A linear half a mile bifurcating the north end of Paradise, little city of Anna Maria, the Gulf on one end and the city pier on the other end. And so when those houses went up, that's 2% of the island is ROR, and most of the ROR is right in that strip. There's a little bit more in another area. 1% is commercial. That's down by Galati's. That's where the Sandbar sits, and that's where the Mediterranean Plaza is down here on the corner of Pine Avenue next to the pier. So we didn't want to make any more business district. We didn't want to lose what we had because we thought that the most important thread in the fabric of a community is its small business district. That's what defines it. Otherwise, you're a neighborhood or a subdivision, as clearly as I can see. If you don't have a place to go buy a sandwich or buy something to wear or get a newspaper or interact with other people in your community, and if you don't have the business owners that go along with that. So our alarm bells went off. Okay, there's 3 houses. Back then, the economy was still pretty going on residential, and we were worried the whole street could become residential. So we went out, Mike Coleman and I got together. Mike lived on Pine Avenue. Mike ran around on a little ragged bicycle, and he said, I think we could buy Pine Avenue for X number of dollars. And I said, well, let's go out and see what you find. And so he, over the period of about, 2 weeks maybe, would go out and he would visit with people. His little old tattered baseball cap and his beat up shorts and t-shirt, and he'd bring another contract, and he'd bring another contract. And so we ended up putting 15 lots on the street under option. We got them at pretty good prices then. Things had started falling off a little bit. And we started figuring out how we were going to capitalize that and what we were going to do. And what we wanted to do was to create the business district that never happened, and to do it in a way that reflected the unique character of Anna Maria. So that's why we said we're going to do 2 stories, not 3, which we were allowed to do. And we're going to do historic designs. Gene Aubrey was our architect, and we're going to do the greenest buildings that have ever been built in the city, 240-mile-an-hour wind loads, ICF construction, recycled floors that are 100 years old that came off the bottom of the swamp when there were floating logs back in the 1900s, and a certain percentage of them would sink. The highest standards in windows and R ratings, and bladders under the decks for water control, which didn't work. And that we would do something that would reflect the great character of Anna Maria the city could be proud of. And we went to we had Gene to do the renderings, and we went to the city, again under contract, so not at risk, maybe $10,000 or $15,000, and said to the city, look, here's what your comp plans have said, and this is what we hear, and we're concerned that we're going to lose this to residential, and we're local, and here's how we'll do it, but we don't want to do it if you don't want us to do it, because they're going to take a lot of risk here, and we're not interested in being pioneers and taking a breast full of arrows. And they said, yes, we do want you to do this. That will be a good thing for our city. We do need that component. And so off we went. We built 2 buildings, and we started on 2 more. We had an election. Guy got elected. Said we were trying to destroy the island. It was the developers against the residents. It got pretty heated. Long story short, he ended up making history as the first public official to face a recall in Manatee County, and who was recalled after 1,100 emails came out that said things like, we're going to make them bulldoze the buildings, and had some really unflattering things that didn't represent the gentleman very well. But we had 2 years of that, of fighting for our lives, because we had all the lots closed at that point. So we're up to our neck in debt. We got 2 buildings. We got two built. The first 2, 315, 317. We're building the second 2, and he's saying, no, you got to tear all these down because you picked this out of the code and that out of the code. And he was good at recreating what was going to be in the code. The place got built. Everybody seemed to like it. You met your neighbors that you seen. Oh, you're the guy with the white dog that I see, because you were on the porch with them, and you get to interact. And we got green. I remember with Mike Coleman talking about, we got to make it green. And Mike said, look, there's no money in green. People don't care about green. I said, Mike, you've just got to keep yourself open to being green, because it's the right thing to do. Well, once Mike got green, we couldn't get green enough after that. I mean, it went from, okay, no pavement, no asphalt, we need community gardens. Well, we had all native landscaping. And, Mike Miller is the landscape guru. And some of you know Mike, and Mike is a madman. I mean, he is a genius, and a fellow that used to kind of scare me until I fell in love with him over his whole ethos of how, you plant the right plants, and these are the right plants for the middle of the island, not on the Gulf side, not on the Bay side. That's how drilled in he was. And so we had all the native vegetation. We wanted organic community garden. How do we do that? How do we get a garden in here? What do we take a lot? How does that work? And then we found Echo out of Fort Myers, and I would encourage all of you that have an interest in that to go down there. They are started with a postage stamp of a piece of property with a structure on it, and now they have 51 acres down there, and they're in 119 countries around the world. My daughter was doing mission work in Thailand. We went and met with them from Mae Sot to Chiang Mai, where they had their headquarters, and they ended up doing a project with my daughter's group about growing moringa, which is one of the most nutritional plants on the planet. That's what they do all over the world. They show people how to feed themselves, and so the business owners in the boutiques, so this was businesses, boutique businesses on the bottom, no big boxes, and vacation rentals or residences on top, all small box. And the business owners sponsored what started as 8 of those community gardens, and we learned about things like Malabar spinach and katuk and Okinawa spinach and Seminole pumpkin, which you'll see on the menu at our restaurants, and the stuffed squash blossoms that we're wild about, and the pumpkin meat itself. And and Malabar, and they had 8 or 9 different things there, and learned about that and put these out so people could see and they could learn about it. And 8 of those gardens turned into 30-something on the island. I think there's more than that now. And then they went out to Lakewood Ranch, because when you had that garden, you wanted to tell your neighbors and friends about it, and then 1 out of 3 or 4 of them would want a garden. So, one thing led to another thing, and then we started ripping up 4 blocks of sidewalks and put in native pathways. And then the Thrashers came in. They had owned an organic baby food company in the United Kingdom, sold it out, did very, very well, came to Anna Maria, wanted to join in what we were doing, and they took what we were doing and took it to another level. We were Florida Green Builders Association top residents, green residents of the year, 2 years in a row. We got platinum designation from them on every single one of our buildings. The Thrashers then took that, they moved the one house across the canal and the Humpback Bridge like an Army Corps of Engineers project. Restored that old early 1900s house, incredible, and made this 7 lots that they had down on their section, more toward the pier, into a net zero, a LEEDS certified net zero energy campus. There are only a few of those in the world. So that means they are producing more energy on their property than they are consuming, and they have the ability to store that energy. You don't have the ability to wheel it back to the power company yet. A lot of communities do have that. And Pine Avenue took off, and the shops came in, and the people came. We got Kelly Carey with the wine and cheese, and I remember it was such a big deal when we got Kelly, because we wanted a food-oriented place. Of course, for me, it's all about the food. And what came with them was the most interesting dynamic, and that was that I hadn't thought about before, but that was all the unique business owners that love being here, that want to contribute, that put their shoulder to the wheel if it's something for the community center or the historical society or the school. And then we had that experience where we had the porch parties and people would convene, and we started doing the Easter egg roll on the street and the Halloween walk, and it just was a great thing that reflected the spirit and the low-rise, high-integrity character of the island, and something that I'm very, very proud about now. And so that then became known as the greenest little main street in America. And at that same time, the most important food movement that in my 38 years by far was coming along, and that was local and sustainable. From every aspect, it makes sense, from the economic development for your area, for how do you lessen your carbon footprint, how do you serve great seasonal stuff, how do you do something that reflects your area, right? We go to all these areas and we travel, and so many of these areas we go to are cookie cutter of the other areas. They got a Senior Frogs, and they got a trinket shops, and they got a daiquiri deck, and they got... That's not unique, that's not what's going to bring people back. You've seen one, you've seen them all. So our local seafood is that heritage. We have been about small A agriculture and seafood since the beginning of man and woman walking on 2 legs in this area. It was the Indians, right? And they had the fish camps, and then the Cubans would come up, and they would salt everything and take it all back, and they'd be here for 4 months of the year. And you'll see all of this if you go down to the Maritime Museum in Cortez, which I encourage you to do. They've got a great, great exhibits there. Cortez is one of the oldest continual fishing villages in the state of Florida. And the people that came after the Cubans were the fishermen from Cataract County in North Carolina. And those families, the Bells and the Fulfords and the Stars and the Banyases and the Capos are still in Cortez today. And the #1 product, what Cortez was built on back in the late 1800s and continues to be the focus of today, is mullet, gray striped mullet. Underappreciated fish, some people would call it a trash fish. Locals know it, like it. We grew up, a lot of people ate it smoked. But the people that really know mullet, Richard's, yeah, he's shaking his head back there. I want to thank the guys from, John and Richard too, from METV and Charles, and for being here. We sure appreciate your presence today. And Karen grew up knowing it, and this is Karen Bell, who's going to talk today, and Karen's father and brother lived to be 90?
89, 85, 91, they're pretty close.
And they got there because they ate mullet. You could look at them and see that mullet is good for you, okay? Mullet ought to have a good reputation. And one of the reasons it ought to is we need to appreciate our local fish, and we need to expand. You know, they thought grouper was a trash fish back in the day. Snook was a trash fish. Lobster, right? They wouldn't, prisoners fed lobster, don't give us any more lobster. Mullet, when it's fat, is as good as any fish that I eat, and I eat a lot of fish. I love pompano, I like a mangrove snapper, I like flounder, but a fat mullet has such great character because it has that oil in it. And that oil comes from the fact that it's getting ready to go to roe. So when they're producing their milt or their eggs, male or female, they're using that fat that they've built up to produce all that. And once they spawn out, you'll see, when you look at a mullet this time of year, or 2 or 3 weeks from now, you'll see big rivulets of fat right into the belly. And then when you harvest one or you clean one up in January after they've rode out, they're very, very lean. Almost snaky that they can be. So that fat mullet is great, fat, oily, unctuous, chef knows. And we started selling mullet 5 years ago because we knew it was the right thing to do and we needed to get people on it. And the Europeans, you didn't have to convince them. They absolutely knew it. And so we need to count on our people to be smart enough to assess their customers and say, are you a seafood lover? Great. Do you know mullet? Have you had gray striped mullet? Well, if you haven't had a piece, you really need to try a piece today. And if you won't try a piece, we're going to bring you a piece because you're a seafood lover, for God's sakes, and you need to know about mullet. And it works. And it's the right thing to do because it's the fish that built Cortez and in large part built the larger community. And the largest export out of Cortez is the roe from the gray striped mullet. 1 million pounds a year. Karen, about right? Goes out of this West Coast area?
Not just the eggs, but last year we did 150,000 pounds raising eggs.
Right, just out of your shop here. So when you look at Fort Myers, up and down the west coast of Florida, all of that goes in containers generally to Taiwan and to Sardinia, where they take our treasure, our roe, that is basically sold at a commodity price, about an average of $10 a pound. Smaller roe sacks. The roe sacks is the embryonic sac of the female mullet. Smaller ones will get less than 10, bigger ones will get more than 10. And it goes there where it loses 15% of its weight in a natural curing process, cool, dry day, dehydrator, kosher salt, and then gets sold back to us at about $100. So we thought, okay, what's wrong with that? Seth Kripe, who's a local boy, made good. His parents owned the Oofs, the great little breakfast place here that moved into town, and he grew up working in that restaurant. He's at the French Laundry in Napa. He makes wine now. We partner up in that. Lola Wines, please drink them. They're available in restaurants and liquor stores around here, wine shops. So he's at the French Laundry and he sees Batargo on the menu and he puts 2 and 2 together and he says, oh, that's what all of my friends now that are fishing and this is where it goes. And he starts the Anna Maria Fish Company and I joined him in that. And that was to say, look, there's a better way to do this. Let's artisanally produce this. We know the fishermen. We're doing it from a fresh state. We're not sending it all the way across the world. And this is a very high-end foodie product. And foodie travelers, that's good people to have. And so we did that and showed that you could do that here. And what we think ought to happen is that we ought to be artisanally producing everything that we can do in a sustainable way here. And that means octopus and amberjack and sardines and mackerel, because those are all great fish. I would rather have a fresh piece of mullet or a mackerel or an amberjack than I would a piece of grouper that's coming from Mexico any day of the week. It's just a better fish, better for our economy, better for our area. And then we see, what happens in these historic years. Cortez is good about utilizing the product. In these, we've had a couple of historic runs. 4 years ago, I think, was the last one. 5 years ago. Karen's dad, I think her brother said they called them blacks, with a big black goes out, and that's when the water just is dark and they're all solid and they're packed together. And it was one of the most historic runs that they had ever seen. And the fish houses get overwhelmed at that point, and fishermen, they quit taking males. Males get 18, 17, 20 cents a pound. Females get about $1.35. That's full weight. So when the fish houses get overwhelmed, the importers and all quit buying males, and all of a sudden you can't distinguish between a male and a female. And when you're out there, what they call in the meat, in the throes of the run, which lasts about 45 days or so, Thanksgiving to maybe the middle of January if it goes a long time, in that there'll be 6 or 7 really big days where the fish are really running. And on those days, it's a $10,000 day plus for a boat. That would be 7,000 pounds of fish. And so when they get those boats so full and they're about to overturn, then the males are all going over the side because they're not going to take the males to the, and so we want to see where we are getting facilities that can use that for fish feed and fertilizer and things of that nature. And why is that important? Well, another reason that's important is because 92% of the seafood that you eat in the United States of America is imported. And 50% of that is aquaculture. And the United States is only producing 1% of the world's aquaculture. Now, China has done this, Asia has done this historically, right? They've been doing this for thousands of years. But we cannot feed the population that's going to be here in 2050, center of the plate, high quality protein, without really getting in the game of aquaculture, because the seas are being overfished by, Michael Crosby will tell you, 40% a year. If you're going out and you're getting menhaden, which is a great, very oily, super heavy nutrient fish, that is a forage fish in the whole food chain for the Gulf, and you're taking 5 pounds of menhaden to make a half a pound of salmon that would be gray if you weren't putting the hormones and the stuff like that in it in an aquaculture process, that's not sustainable. It's just not a smart thing to do. So we've got to look for other ways to do that. And one of the ways that we think that could be done here in a really big way is bivalves. So you're sitting in the middle of the only area in the country that has 3 national estuaries on its border. Tampa Bay to our north, Sarasota Bay here, Charlotte Harbor. No place else in the country has that. From a standpoint of water quality, nutrient level, and water temperature, this is ground zero for bivalves. Warmer water, faster growing. Clam will grow here about half the time it'll grow in cold waters of the Northeast or the Northwest. And all the different aquaculture has different levels of impact environmentally, right? Some of them that are done in closed pens in small areas, a lot of waste stream, swimming in that, hormones, antibiotics, all kind of different. Some of it, not so bad. Some of it's a little bit troubling. Bivalves are positive for the environment because every single organism filters 30 gallons of seawater a day. And they promote the benthic environment, the bottom. The regulators will tell you, the people that regulate 128,000 acres of shellfish approved waters in the state of Florida. To get a leash, you've got to find a piece of ground that's basically looks like desert, that doesn't have anything on the bottom. Now, Dr. Crosby and the other scientists will tell you, well, if you want to create seagrass, bring clams in. Because in 2 or 3 years, that waste stream and that nitrate and all of that will make seagrass grow up. So that's one of the little things. But the important thing is that 128,000 acres of shellfish approved waters around the coast of the state of Florida, less than 1%, a little more than 1/2% is leased. So the capacity is there, and the species is there, and it's great for the environment. So we started the Gulf Shellfish Institute to help promote that, and now we have space at the port, and we put 600,000 clams out at the port. It's not shellfish approved waters there, but it's a water quality project. It's a restoration project. It's a recreation project, because scallops, you hear a lot about scallops, right? Restoration for scallops. Scallops last 13 months. Clams live 30 years. So those clams we plant at the port, their offspring will have spat that will go out and will seed a lot of other areas. So yeah, here's all the different things that, the hierarchy of use for mullet. We ought not to take the shuck and make cat food out of it. Now, shuck is emblematic. Shuck means you throw it away, right? That's what they call it once they've taken the roe out. It's then called a shuck. So that shuck goes to Nigeria, or it goes to cat food, or it goes to other things. Well, we think we ought to find out where the most value is, and you ought to do that with fillets and oil and fertilizer and batarga, and we would like to see that happen. With the clams, we have a new clam here now called the Sunray Venus. Now, it's not a new clam for us, it's a native clam. We all know them, we walk down the beach and we see them. It has the rays of the sun going through it. And it's oblong, it's more butterfly shaped, like a butterfly with his wings folded in half, than the roundness of a hardshell clam. Hardshells is the #1 clam harvested in Florida and in the Northeast, right? That's the white tablecloth clam. Manila is the cheaper clam, chef will know, about half the price, stronger. Little more fishy. Hard shells do not open. They have a 20% default rate for opening, so you can't ship them long distance or you can't export them. But sunrays do, and sunrays open at 100% success rate, so they're perfect for export or shipping long distance. They've got a 3-to-1 meat to shell ratio. Perfect. Karen, thank you. This is them. You see the rays coming through, and you see how meaty this is. So 4 years ago, Kurt Himmel, who is part of the Gulf Shellfish Institute, and is a very interesting guy. If you want to know more about Kurt Himmel, look up the Tampa Bay Times. Klinkenberg was their great feature writer, and he did a Sunday, it was a Super Bowl feature, Super Bowl Sunday feature on this cherry stone size of a man, he called him. Kurt's kind of small. And he said, I'll never forget it, I get the Sunday paper and I open it up, and there's this picture, this guy's he's got a floppy hat, and he's looking under a microscope. He says, while everybody else is getting ready for Super Bowl Sunday and getting their nachos and all that ready, Kurt Himmel is under a microscope watching clams have sex. Got me. All right, who is this guy? What is he doing? How do I get to him? He's on Terracea. Okay, here's the name of his company. All right, so I'm stalking him, and we get together, and he starts telling me about the clams, and he's telling me about sunrays. So this is 7 or 8 years ago. So he's been working on sunrays for 12 years to figure out how do you mitigate the factors that are preventing you from propagating a spawn. So that's Kurt's expertise. He sells about 70% of the clam seed and a lot of the oyster seed for the whole eastern seaboard, basically North Carolina down, almost all of it in Florida. So his expertise is propagating a spawn for bivalves, but also growing algae. Well, anybody can grow algae. We can all grow algae on our back porch in a Dixie cup, right? Just leave it there. But his specialty is keeping algae stable, and that is very, very hard to do, right? Because there's bacterial, the stuff that comes out of the air, it goes up and down and crashes. And if you don't keep that bacteria, keep that algae stable, the clams don't eat. So the clams have got to be 2 to 4 millimeters before they go out in bags on the bottom into some of that shellfish approved waters, and then they get algae on their own. So those clams have the ability to be a new species for us. 3-to-1 shell ratio, sweet like conch, bigger, much bigger, and the chefs love them. So we had 3 million on the bottom the first year 4 years ago. Now we're getting them about 60% of the year. We have red tide closures and issues we have to deal with. But these have the potential to be Florida's next tomato. Now that's a pretty bold statement. I'm going to talk about this project next, so hold it. Florida's tomato is a $400 million industry a year on 40 to 50,000 acres. Sunray clams, you can grow 500,000 of them an acre. Sunray clams right now are 37 cents, or twice as much as hard shells. Sunray clams need to come down, and I think they will come down as we are able to ramp this up. Right now, there's a problem with juvenile morbidity, so they're propagating the spawns, but then they're losing 80 or 90% of it. We've got to figure out if that's bacteria, if it's fungal, what is it, so that the people can take risk. The farmers that are going to have to do it can take a risk, and so we are working on that. But when they do it and do it well, 500,000 an acre. So if you had 500,000 an acre, you can do those numbers, and those numbers say on 4,000 acres. Remember, there's 128,000 that are leasable. On 4,000 acres, you would have a $400 million crop. And think about the relative intensity of water usage versus water cleaning, of pesticides and fertilizers and fungicides and all of that, of land use, of de-riching the soil, of all of those sort of things of a tomato, versus having that kind of a clam population that would reproduce and replicate itself. And I think that's the way we can be a model in the U.S. for what our area can do to address this issue of the U.S. producing only 1% of the world's aquaculture. This is a project that we started in conjunction with the county and the Sea Grant people. And today I'm proud to tell you that we have got almost 25,000 pounds of substrate, so that's what this becomes. The best way to get more oysters into an area and also to do shore protection and things of that nature is to put down shell in bags and big like doormat things. And that substrate, which is what the scientists call, when the oysters have their spawn, it likes to go and attach to that. So we've done that with just the oyster shells from our 3 restaurants in about the last 4 months. We've produced 25,000 pounds of these that are now all out in Perico in different ways. So what we want to take this from is from, what I like to see next is, could we have a repository at the Maritime Museum in Cortez? And then Karen and John Horn and John Banyas and all the people that have restaurants in the Seafood Shack in that area would have a great little place that they could come over, and if we could get the county to, and then try to take it even further to see if you could take that for all of the restaurants in the county. But I think it's just another good example of what we can do. And Robert Baugh, our COO, started this. And we're certainly, proud of what he's done, and we want to hopefully see this continue. So this is, the plants, the boats, the tying all of this together, so how we can fully utilize, right? Yeah, we're utilizing, but how do we better utilize it? How do we get a higher dollar? Because that means our fishermen gets more. That means we protect our blue economy, and we promote it. And oh, by the way, Cortez had a catastrophe happen in '95 with the net ban, right? So the recreational fishermen get more powerful than the commercial fishermen. We've seen that happen where the politics of places change. The greens out west get more, powerful than the loggers and things. And they put a referendum up, and people can disagree. I don't think there was any empirical evidence. The mullets were in good shape, but they won that referendum, and they put a whole generation after generation after generation of fishermen out of business. Because throwing with a cast net is a young man's game. You're not going to do that at 40 years old with your shoulders that you've been working. And I think if you ask a lot of the people and the old timers in Cortez, are your best days ahead of you or behind you, they'd say behind us because of that. And if we adopt this model, I think, and we do aquaculture, and we're artisanally producing stuff, and we're doing it in a way that you can go and see it, and there's food tourism involved in it, and there's some really exciting things that I'm hearing about, part of what Karen maybe will talk about today, that are happening in Cortez that are going to amplify that's good for everybody. It's good for the local economy. It's good for the kind of people, because who do we want to have come here, right? We got pressure, and people are concerned, and we're not going to stop people from coming. But what we can do is to try to draw the right people. And so if we care about our economy, and we care about our environment, and we care about our heritage and our history, and we're doing things like I think we've done on Pine Avenue, and what we try to do with the restaurants, we're serving as much local sustainable stuff as possible with our farms and all of that in conjunction, I think that helps draw the right kind of people that want to leave a low footprint and respectful of what you do. And I think that's the best we can do. Other little programs, skip the straws, because you see the straws everywhere. You see the cracker wrappers everywhere. So we got rid of the crackers. Now we just have the sleeves. Open the sleeve, put them in a little cup, take them out to the people. We don't see cracker wrappers around anymore. We don't see straws on the beach because we don't serve straws. And if you want a straw, we're going to give you a straw, but it's going to be a green straw that's starch or whatever, and it's going to biodegrade. Some people don't like it, but it's the right thing to do. And there's Mullet, and there's wild pigs, which were another project, but we don't really need to talk about that today, but another great project, and we've got that in all of the restaurants. And some of the great culinary things that that Eric Walker, our head of culinary, and our chefs do. And so this all gets tied together, and then it starts getting more attention and more notice, and then the Patel College of Global Sustainability at the University of South Florida comes over, and they've heard about what we want to do, what we're doing, and they want to know more about what we're doing, and they come and investigate what we're doing, and then now we're 2 years later, and I'm a faculty member at the college. Go figure, you know. I'm like, and I've gone over there and I speak to their students, and it's right there. It's in this new $10 million building that Ginshaft, the president Ginshaft of the university actually has their office in it. It's right near the stadium, and you can't get a parking place for it. And I'm like, to understand the importance of the offer that they made to make me a faculty member, I said, well, does it come with a parking space? And they said, no, it wouldn't come with a parking. So I was like, okay, now I understand how important this thing is. So that then goes to the United Nations, and the United Nations people come down to one of the things we're doing that was very much like this today, where we're touring and showing people the street and talking about what we're doing. Sarbalin Khan, who's the head of the World Tourism Organization of the United Nations, says nobody else is doing this to the extent that you're doing it. Well, that's flattering, you know, and now Pine Avenue is known as the greenest little main street in America. That's very flattering. And so now they have made us, in conjunction with what the Patel College is doing at University of South Florida at St. Pete, I think there's some stuff maybe from the Kennedy Space Program included in that, as the first global observatory for sustainable tourism in North America. Okay, you know, that's a very interesting thing, and I'm off and speaking at Windsor Castle on a symposium on sustainable tourism, and I'm scratching my head, you know, wondering how I got there when 38 years ago I walked into the kitchen of the Sandbar restaurant and started cooking. So that's the story. I thank you for your interest, and I'm ready to take questions, and we're going to serve you some food. So you're going to have some Batarga toast. So Batarga is round and fat and rich and buttery and anchovy-like, and when you pair it with a little charred toast or something, it really milds down and becomes, and these are the clams?
Yeah, so we have
oh, okay, so you're getting all in one.
Batarga,
yeah.
chorizo, and a sunray Venus clam on top.
So this may be a little intense for some of you, and if it is, just, you know, put it in the napkin and roll it up. But you're going to get a really good taste. So the bread is made in our bakery with our beach house renovation. I hope you all go see the new beach house deck. 2 years of planning and fighting the city of Bradenton Beach to retain our property rights, and 4 years and 4 phases. We're finally done. So we hope you go see it. We've quadrupled the size of our bakery, and now we bake everything but our oyster crackers and saltines. Every bread that we do in the restaurant and all the desserts are done in the bakery now. So we're real proud of that. So questions?
Okay, does anyone have any questions? Yes, Mr. Spears.
Oh, I don't need this, but this is for, doesn't work, right?
Just for the camera.
It's a camera, okay. Can you say, Ed, you mentioned something about our fisheries our waterways are being overfished. Did you say 40% or?
That's that's the figure I hear from the scientific community, that we're overfishing you know, we've stabilized, we're up at, and Karen may tell you the total tonnage, but whatever billions of pounds a year, and it's pretty stable now, right? It's not going up anymore because there's just not that much there, but it's not sustainable at that level. We're going to fishing everything out in a lot of the places. Now, mullet is the ultimate sustainable seafood. And so everything we do with mullet or amberjack or Spanish mackerel, another great fish that's underappreciated, has got to be done in a sustainable way. And we got to the people promoting it, because it's our grandchildren that we want to have the ability to participate in that fishery if they so desire.
Any other questions?
Could you discuss the design of the structures on Pine, how they came at their look?
Sure. So when we started out, we went to Gene Aubry, who was a local architect, but nationally known, done major projects, including the Naples Philharmonic, including the Sarasota Library. It's a very interesting structure. And we said, Gene, here's what we want. And we took him around and we showed him what we wanted. We took him to Cortez, and we took him to the old cottages like the Roser Cottage. And we said, we're not looking for a Key West look. no, I don't know about you, but if I see another spire and a thing that looks exactly like we want that old Florida historic look. We don't want faux med, we don't want post-modern. We want. And Gene said, what you're looking for is a craftsman's or a carpenter look. It's before architects came and screwed everything up, is what Gene said, being an architect. And he brought the rendering. So we saw Gene out on the street for a week, and he'd be on the corner with his onion skins, and he'd be drawing, and then he came and he presented us 3 renderings, and we said, that's it. You got it. You killed it. Those are the renderings that we took to the city, and they now hang on my wall. So they reflected that unique Anna Marita character. And then the next thing was the intensity, to do 2 stories instead of 3, to not put any pavers. First we had to put pavers where the handicap spots were. They made us do that, and then we showed them where 250 filter mix, which is the compacted sand, beach sand, can do that, and that was one of the things that we proved to them. And so that happened, and then the other layers of it happened. We controlled our water usage. We were required to be 1 foot lower than any of the properties around us because the new Swift mud regulations that had come along and nobody else had built in the meantime, and that was because we were mixed use. We had residential and commercial. So you had to go to the most egregious. And in doing that, Lynn Burnett Townsend, our engineer, who is fabulous, worked with all the swales, and we tried to do the bladders, and we did all the pervious surfaces and not putting the asphalt down and all of those things. And in the progression of going from the first 2 buildings to the second 2 to doing 11 buildings, which it totaled out, we sold 4 lots to the Thrashers. Lynn redefined for Swift mud what could be processed on a piece of property. They said, okay, you now have shown us that that this can be taken to another level that we didn't think was possible. And that then begat the whole island-wide thing that you may or not be aware of now, but all 3 island cities have embraced the plan that says you will do this in every lot, in every area, because we want to try to keep runoff from going into the Gulf and the Bay. So now if you're building a house, you got a $6,000 price to go in and dig out underneath that and to put in the kind of French drains and the things that will help that water percolate into the water table.
Does anybody have another question?
Yes, sir, Richard.
How do we maintain a balance between growth and development and sustainable, authentic community, especially like places like Lombard Point, which are under development?
We do have another speaker next, just so that way. The whole topic.
Well, I think that's that is what this is all about. You do it the best you can. So we came in and said, okay, the way we're going to do this is to sacrifice some economic development on the front end with that extra story. But we thought long term, this will be more successful if it has the right feel. For what the Carlos Baruf is trying to do out in Lombard Point and what Whiting Preston, and I've had conversations with Whiting, and I think Whiting gets this, really does, that you've got to go out if you want to be successful and feel good about what you're doing and do that project the right way. And if you do it the right way with intermodal transportation within it, with a farm in the middle that people can go to, with local food stuff that's in it, you can do that in a way that will help you in your sales as well, because the people care more and more about that. But there's a lot of homes we're talking about in there, and there's a lot of pressure. And the best answer that I can give you is that the best way that we can, because you can't stop people from coming, is that we've got to be putting out things in a way that attract the right kind of people that want to come.
And can you talk about just a little bit about the dichotomy and the challenges of trying to offer as much locally sourced seafood and produce and those kind of things with the cost aspect?
It's more expensive. So that's where it comes down. And people think it's too much, right? So what I'm doing costs $2 more than what somebody else is doing. And that means you got to pay $6 more because you work on a 30% cost. And that's not easy. It's not easy. It means your food cost is going to be a little higher. It means your sales staff has really got to be on their toes. They've got to be understanding what you're doing and promoting what you're doing. And you've got to have the right mix. You've got to have the opportunity for somebody that wants to come in and eat a great piece of fresh fish to do so for $26, but somebody wants the ability to come in and eat for $14, they ought to be able to do that too and still enjoy that $1 million location. Yes, sir.
I'll wait till later. He has a speaker coming up.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody enjoyed it.